I realized, and this was around in my mid-30s when I kind of checked all the boxes of what success meant as a 20-year-old, which was basically seven-figure, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled. And that's when I realized, Andrew, that I wasn't living a definition of success that was determined by me. I went on this retreat with some fellow entrepreneurs, and we all agreed to two words, and we agreed to no judgment. And that's when I felt this huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt I didn't have to wear any masks anymore. I could just be me. So the book, which will hopefully be released towards the end of this year, really focuses on business owners to look at their definition of success and perhaps, and most likely, redefine it.
Welcome back to the Hustle and Grind podcast, the show where we dig into why real entrepreneurs trade comfort for conviction. This isn't about vanity metrics or overnight success. It's about the stories behind building a reputation that actually matters. I'm your host, Andrew, keynote architect, platform builder, and fellow founder in the trenches. Today, I'm sitting down with Saahil Mehta, the global serial entrepreneur and conscious leadership coach. Saahil is a true global citizen with businesses spanning 3 continents, but he's just as comfortable on a mountain peak as he is in a boardroom. As a member of the prestigious MG 100 coaches, he's been recognized by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith as one of the top leadership minds in the world. He doesn't just talk about the hustle, he talks about the climb. Saahil uses his experience as a passionate mountaineer to give leaders the tools and rituals they need to scale their own summits, all while maintaining a zero-regret life that balances health, relationships, and career. So, Saahil, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to talking to you because I know we talked a little bit before the show, and I love the fact that not only you're a serial entrepreneur, you've also done a lot of work in kind of the self-help space and kind of getting your mindset is, I guess, the best word I can put for it. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you today. Thank you for being a guest. Absolutely. I enjoyed our pre-show conversation so much. I'm excited for this episode as well. It's almost like the podcast before.
Absolutely.
But where I want to start with, we heard your bio, and I always love to hear serial entrepreneur because you know that's somebody that has really built numerous big things. And I want to hear a little bit about kind of some of your background and your entrepreneur story. So what businesses have you built so far? Just as an overview.
Absolutely. So look, serial entrepreneur means, in my case, it was figuring out what is the right rhythm in life for me. In reality, I started my entrepreneurial journey in the real estate space. Mm-hmm. Okay, I was actually working for someone else. I realized working for a friend is a bad idea because, especially when it's a very close friend, our expectations were just not aligned, and I quickly came to the conclusion. This was in my early 20s or mid 20s. That the friendship was far more valuable than the opportunity that was given to me. So I wrote him a letter. It was very emotional. Thankfully, we're very solid, close friends today. So I definitely agree with the choice I made, even though it was very painful at the time. And then I kind of just accidentally got into it because I had a friend who said, "Hey, you're not doing anything, and you've studied engineering. You're really good at building models. Can you help me build models to determine whether these investments I'm looking to make in the real estate space in New York are interesting or not?" And I said, "Sure." I just thought, I get to try something out. It kind of sounds fun. And the more I did it with him and helped him, I realized I was like, wow, this is actually interesting. And back then my focus was let's make money, right? Let's make money and let's make it fast. So I said, well, you're doing all these things. I'm helping you out. Why don't we partner on a couple of deals? And things were going pretty well, making good money on the deals that I was involved in. And all that came crashing down in 2008. And even though I thought I was diversified, I had real estate investments in Europe, in the US, in the Middle East, nothing survived. I shouldn't say nothing, almost nothing survived. There were a few that managed to make it, and then they're still active today somehow, miraculously. But overall, it was a bloodbath. And that really took my confidence away because, Andrew, I know it was external. I know that the economy suddenly crashed and so many people got burnt. But I pointed at myself and I said, maybe it's me. I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
I shouldn't try out entrepreneurship. I failed. And I worked really hard to get myself out. In fact, when I had a coach, they helped me to see with more clarity. And I came to quickly realize that, yes, I was one cog in that wheel, but I wasn't responsible for this massive crash that happened in the world around us, which literally took so many people down. And so I had this opportunity then again to start a company, and this was, which I thought was a no-brainer. I thought this has to work. It was how to make air conditioning systems more efficient in the Middle East, where they're just used all year round. So you're thinking, this has got to work. And because it was already working in the US, which is where we, the inventor stayed and had developed this liquid. And basically what it did is it goes in the piping, and think of it as removing the cholesterol in your arteries, right? So then blood flows better. That's basically what it was doing for the air conditioning system. And although it was a good product and it had a lot of scope, I was a co-founder and I was the minority shareholder. And the guy who was the majority shareholder, things were very rosy when we were discussing growth and opportunity. But then when operations started, there was a lot of friction. And look, the previous version of me kept pointing like it's his fault and it's that one's fault. But the truth is, it takes two hands to shake. And now when I look back, there were many things I could have done differently as well. But at the end, I realized it's not worth all this headache that I'm going through. So I just left, right? And that meant a loss as well, because whatever I invested in the company was now pretty much hoping that he could make it succeed. And after I left, I think it was another 6 months or 9 months, the company then collapsed. So, that's 0 out of 2 so far. Luckily for me, one of the saving graces was my father, in the sense that he became an entrepreneur at the age of, in his 50s, because he reached the retirement age. And when these things happened, I just started to support him. So I was kind of the second generation in that one. But then after, my confidence again started building up. My coach started to really help me change my mindset, work on things. Because I know that I'm intelligent. The school results, university results, I was an investment banker. There have been successes, but the problem with the failures was I only saw the failure. I didn't look back and go, where have I succeeded? Because there were plenty of successes behind me, but the focus was primarily on the failure. And thankfully, my coach, again, she's amazing, helped me to identify this. And I know this sounds obvious, but it's so easy for me to fall into that trap. But I got the confidence back, started another business, which is now still running. It's in the hospitality space. So I'm a second generation entrepreneur in the business my dad started. There's this other one that I started. And then eventually what I realized was none of them fulfilled me. They gave me a lifestyle that I could enjoy, but I wasn't feeling like over the moon on a daily basis. And I said to myself, what's going on? And I realized, and this was around in my mid-30s when I kind of checked all the boxes of what success meant as a 20-year-old, which was basically 7-figure net worth, married, kids, nice accommodation, driving a Porsche, fancy watch, traveling the world, blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't feeling fulfilled. And that's when I realized, Andrew, that I wasn't living a definition of success that was determined by me. I was living a definition of success that was inherited from family, from society, from media, social media, etc. And that's kind of when the journey to discover what I truly want, so that I can start moving in a direction that is more intentional, began.
So I love the fact that you said that, because I think a lot of times us as entrepreneurs, we have this baby that we're trying to raise that is our businesses. And, I want to touch really briefly on when we feel that the business fails, we feel it's a personal failure within us because we're really attached to this. It's the dynamic is really different than a standard job. It really, really, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand correctly. But I like the fact that you also said, I was living a lot, on paper, everything should have been there, and that wasn't really the way it worked out. I wasn't fulfilled for it. Talk a little bit more about that and what you've learned and how you've been able to. We were talking before the show about a lifestyle by design, and I think this is a concept that might not, or some people might have heard about it but not seen it embodied. Talk a little bit about what you mean by that and what you mean by where your success is now to show people this is another way, another path.
Absolutely. So look, a lot of my previous definition of success was around fame and fortune. And when I say fame, it doesn't mean I'm a rock star, on stage or acting in a Hollywood movie. It just means that I'm famous in my space, right? That I'm well known in my space, whatever industry that may be. But here's the thing, Andrew, what I didn't realize is, and perhaps you can relate with this, I was facing a lot of challenges, physically, emotionally, but they weren't big enough where it was. And wait, I shouldn't say they weren't big enough. They probably were big enough, but as an entrepreneur, or as me, I should say, and I'm a people pleaser, or at least I was, I would kind of just shun those things away because it felt like confrontation, and I would just hope it would disappear. Right? One day, magically, it just goes away. But it didn't. And over time, what I realized, those things just got worse. I felt like the frog in boiling water, where it's not that hot initially, and then someone's just increasing the temperature ever so slightly, and it gets a little warmer. It's uncomfortable, but I'm like, I got used to it. And then it gets a little warmer, and then I'm like, I'm getting used to it. And then it gets to that point where eventually you go, oh shit, I'm gonna die, right? Luckily, I didn't get to that stage, but it was big enough a problem to take seriously, but not big enough where I felt I had to do something about it. I just chose to ignore it, like any smart entrepreneur would do, right? But so I went on this retreat with some fellow entrepreneurs, and we all agreed to two words, and we agreed to no judgment. And that's when I felt this huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt I didn't have to wear any masks anymore. I could just be me. And the only way I can describe the following 4 days is euphoric. Okay? And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my God, if this is who I am, when I've eliminated fear, then who the hell is that guy that I'm going back to? Because that's definitely not the guy I want to be. I want to be more like this guy. And so that kind of started me on the quest of discovering what was important for me. And I do want to say at this point is, again, with my tendencies as a people pleaser previously, was I would prioritize others over myself, which is not bad in general, but not when it harms me. Right? If you're doing it and it makes no difference to me, or if it makes me happy, great. But in many cases, I was doing things, I was saying yes when I really wanted to say no. And so I said to myself, the buck stops here. I'm not going to please others at the expense of my well-being, and I'm going to prioritize myself. So I became my number one priority. Not my business, not my parents, not my spouse, not my kids, but me. Because I knew when I become a better version of myself, I will improve all the other roles and labels that are on me, right?
Yeah. It's like on an airplane where when they, before you take off, they tell you put your air mask on yourself first, then help others, because you're not going to be any good if you're passed out. It's being able to kind of be within ourselves. And having been a recovered nice guy, I completely understand. But when I first started my entrepreneur journey, I had a good mentor of mine, Greg, who one day said, I want you to, he referred me to the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dan Glover. I have never felt so judged and understood by a book in my life. It was just like a pivotal book in my life that helped me to see. And as I'm going through these chapters, looking at it, going, "Oh, that's what that is. Oh, that's why I feel that way." And it took a second. And I think a lot of people, it's a defense mechanism for that. The nice guy syndrome is more of a defense mechanism. There's a difference between being a quote unquote nice guy and just being a genuinely, good person to others, and what we kind of see as, it's when it breaches that boundary of just being a nice human to doing things because you want people to like you. And so kind of that was a pivotal moment. So I 100% resonate with where you were at with that. And so I want to, because we're talking about success, we're talking about that. I know you have a second book that's coming out towards the end of this year with a framework and defining what success means to you. Talk to me a little bit about that book and some of the background to it, the one that you're co-authoring with Dr. Marshall Goldsmith.
Absolutely. So the book, which will hopefully be released towards the end of this year, really focuses on business owners to look at their definition of success and perhaps and most likely redefine it. Because when you live a life that is successful by your own measure, you are more fulfilled. You feel more inner peace. And I know the other entrepreneurs who are listening on this, inner peace is something we all crave. I mean, there's so much commotion and chaos in our lives across everything. If I can just get that peace. But so fulfillment leads to inner peace. And it's taking you away from a life of regret. Okay? So, it's this whole concept of living a zero regret life. Okay? So what is success? Let's just go through the process, right? Let me give the audience a basic framework. We go into a lot more depth in the book, but I'll share the basic framework right here. Now, I mentioned to you in our pre-talk that I'm a mountaineer. I love climbing. I love mountains. I love climbing mountains. I love skiing on mountains. I love trekking on mountains. I love staying on mountains. It's my thing, right? So a lot of my work uses mountain analogies. And in the mountaineering world, you have something known as the 7 summits, which are the tallest mountains on each of the 7 continents. And that got me thinking, what are my internal 7 summits? And some people have asked me, like, why 7? Why not like 3? Because that would be easier. I said, well, if I said 3, everyone will pick health, wealth, and relationships. Pretty much 90% of the audience. It's too obvious. It's not really making you think beyond those 3 of what matters in your life. So I picked 7 because there's 7 summits, lucky number 7, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 dwarves. I mean, 7 pops up a lot in our life. It's a great number. I love it. Nice ring to it. Yeah. So anyway, what was surprising for me when I was looking at what are the 7 most important things in my life, because success is never one thing, right? I mean, you might be a billionaire, but if you have a horrible family life, horrible health, no fun, no community, etc., what's the point? So I discovered during this process that fun and recreation was very important for me. And that would not have come up if somebody asked me what are the 3 most important things in your life. Yeah. But this came up and I was like, oh, wow. Because now when I make a decision, I'm not just looking at how does it, before I had the blinders on and I would see more money or more growth for my company, which generally meant more money. I would say, yes, let's go with it. Yeah. But now that I have 7 summits, whenever I have to make a big decision, I ask myself, what is the net effect on these 7 summits? Am I going overall up or am I going overall down? Because if I'm going overall down, I have to question that decision. And if it's temporary, I don't mind a dip. If I have to give up fun and recreation for a month, go for it. Let's do it, because the project needs a lot of my attention, or 2 months. But I've seen over and over again business owners telling me, oh, my family is my first priority or second priority, and my health is super important. And then 6 months into the coaching, I'm like, I just want to be the mirror in your life for a second. You keep telling me you're just making these temporary sacrifices, but you've just continuously made one temporary sacrifice after another after another. Let's just be honest with ourselves. It's not a sacrifice, it's a choice. So you told me, health or family was, your top two. Generally, these come up in the top two. I'm not seeing it based on the actions. So let's reframe, because either do something about it or call it what it is. But stop with this, I'll get to it when.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think it's hard for us as entrepreneurs, though, is we live this life where we are, at least in the first 5 or 6 years of the business, we're all just putting fires out. Like we're chief everything officer. We just keep doing these things and managing mayhem. And I think that's one of the things, it's difficult for us to see either, success in it. You talked earlier about, having really internalizing the real estate company failure, because right after 2008, even though it had almost nothing to do with you, it was just part of the consequences. That's part of what we deal with as well. But, I love what you said. We kind of know what success is. And if you had 3 things to pick, you'll pick the same 3 things, and it's kind of a nice thing to look at, but nobody ever actually, people aren't going to apply it, right? But, so what are, I want to ask the question just to kind of, to let people get more of an idea for what you're talking about, not the standard things that we all hear from a bunch of different gurus and things, but what you're actually talking about as far as success is, and maybe helping that entrepreneur that, we were talking about coaching, going 6 months later, going, are you actually doing this? What are some of those key metrics what does that look like in people's heads when they have finally come to a point where it's like, I thought success was money, but it really isn't. Here's what my success looks like.
Well, look, first you have to define the 7. And I'm just going to give my 7, because then maybe that paints a little bit of a picture for the audience. So mine, health is first, family is second, fun and recreation is actually third, and then it's work. Right? Work and finance, I kind of clubbed it together because as an entrepreneur, I feel they're both interlinked. Then I had personal growth. I've got spirituality and community service. That's my 7 in that particular order. Now, some of them you might go, yes, some of them sound more of a priority than the others. Absolutely. Health for me, like I said, I'm my first priority. And health is not just physical health, it's mental, emotional, physical, all of them, right? So I look at, just imagine the 7 mountains are 7 balls that you're juggling every single day. Because that's what you, as an entrepreneur, that's what you're doing. It's not just one task that you do, right? You're doing so many things. You're juggling these 7 balls on a daily basis. Now, some of these balls are made of crystal. And you drop them, there's no turning back. Right? You ignore. Chronic health issue. Now you're on medication for life, and it's never going to reverse, or rarely going to reverse. You ignore. Kid doesn't want to associate themselves with you, or your spouse left you. So make sure you know which ones are crystal balls. And then the other balls are rubber. Right? You drop them, they bounce back. I lost my business, I bounce back. I lost my business again, I bounce back. Yeah, twice it's happened in my life. So clearly that's a rubber ball if I can rebuild. Yeah. And so if I treat it like a glass ball, I'm in danger. Because then I'm maybe ignoring the ones which are actually, not glass, crystal. I'm actually ignoring the ones that are crystal. So once you prioritize, I'm simplifying the process, we obviously go very deep into this. Once you prioritize them, then you know which ones can be ignored temporarily and those that should not be ignored. And when we're looking at the schedule or how time is devised for these business owners who are very busy, quote unquote, including me, including you, how are we spending our time? And are we spending it and allocating enough time to the things that really need our attention? Because I'll tell you the fear. The fear is, if I spend less hours in my business is not going to do as well. I thought like that. And I kept thinking like that. Everyone's telling me, you got to work on the business, not in the business. I'm like, that's bullshit, because I keep trying to do that. And then, the person doesn't work as well as I do. They make these mistakes. We lost $100,000 here because of a stupid mistake. I got to get back in. right? We can all relate to that. Now, in my case, I was forced into working on the business. Well, forced. My dad passed away a few years ago, and we were partners, right? I was a second generation in one business, I was a first generation in another, and then I started a third business as well, which was where I'm first generation. But we kind of did things together. So when I lost my dad, the obvious thing to do was to let go of the newest business, the new kid on the block, because the new kid on the block was generating the least amount of revenue. Now, if my success measure is revenue and revenue alone, that would have been the right decision to make. Okay, Andrew? However, my success definition had been defined, and that third business was the one that fulfilled me the most. That's the one where I'm coaching business leaders. That's where I'm speaking, I'm writing, I'm sharing knowledge, and I'm constantly learning as a result as well. That's the one that fulfills me the most. And I knew if I gave that up, it's like I'm giving a part of me up. And so I said, okay, if you don't want to give this up, what does it take with the other businesses to ensure that this is running? And I made this list. What are things that I enjoy making decisions that only I can make? And even if I don't enjoy them, if I'm the only one who can make it, let me note it down. And everything else needs to be delegated, either by empowering existing team and or adding new team members. And so I went through that process, and over a span of maybe a year and a half, I built out those teams, and now I'm working a lot more on the business for two of them, and I'm spending a lot more time in the one that fulfills me, because that's what brings me joy on a daily basis. But I was kind of, I say forced, but it still was a choice. It always is a choice. It might be a hard choice, but it's a choice. But it's one of those things where I said, Saahil, why didn't you start this earlier?
Yep.
But here's the thing, Andrew, because some people, including my former self, would think if I'm not involved in the business as much, what if the revenues start to decline? What if things go down? Now, here's the reality in my case, and this was extremely humbling. We've had the 4 best years we've ever had. And it was basically since I started working in the business.
Yeah.
Okay? I was the bottleneck because I was the one involved in too many decisions. We had planted great seeds many years before, a decade before, and a lot of them were germinating and turning into great opportunities, but it was slowing down because of me. Now, I'm not saying this is what will be for you or your audience who are listening right now, but that is what it was for me. And I realized, I was like, actually, this is great. I'm so happy it doesn't depend as much on me, because now I've got more freedom. I can go home early to watch my son play the drums in a concert, or my daughter play the viola. I can go watch one of their sports games and leave early. I can travel and be away from the office for weeks at a time, even if it's not work related, and I don't have to worry or stress. I can be present and enjoy my holidays with my friends and my family and my kids and my spouse. Versus the brain always being entrepreneurial mind being on. It just never switches off. Now I get to switch it off. So it was very humbling. I guess I'm very blessed with an amazing team, and I'm not as important as I thought I was.
I've seen a number of friends go through this process of stepping back from their business and realizing, oh, wait, I don't have to. And yes, you're right, very humbling, but I think liberating at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's nice that you brought that up and you mentioned that. So getting towards the end of things here, again, Saahil, thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate you being here. And I love the fact that you're giving us a completely different viewpoint on entrepreneurship. I think it's really important for us to see that it's not always about money, unless that's one of your higher success. But, it's sometimes about other things as well, and lifestyle by design. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning into the Hustle and Grind podcast, where we unpack what it really takes to build something that matters. If today's conversation hit home, do me a favor. Share it with someone who's in the trenches too. And if you're building your own brand, platform, or message and want help turning that story into serious authority, head over to theauthorityforge.com to see how we can help. Until next time, keep showing up, keep shipping, and keep chasing the work that sets you on fire. I'm Andrew, and this was the Hustle and Grind Podcast.